Well. So you just got done playing Factorio and you want to start building your own mega facility in Foxhole. You're interested in building behemoth tanks like the Warden Predator or large scale ammo facilities to help fuel the front line. Why don't we just pause for a second there for a quick disclaimer?
Warning, facility gameplay in Foxhole is extremely painful and will lead to burnout. Burnout is 100% guaranteed and is unfortunately the third major killer to Foxhole players, right behind crashing out and alcoholism. This is your one warning to stop the video and enjoy the blissful ignorance of frontline fighting. Seriously, you're gonna regret being a facility player. Don't do it, please. I haven't seen my wife in a month and my chair is smelling like piss and sweat.
Anyway, if you're still with me, that means you're new to facilities and you're looking to learn how to build them in Foxhole. Building facilities is often considered a rare art form requiring careful planning and a healthy bit of autism to operate. In this video, we'll run through some basics on what every facility will need in order to be successful. Next, I'll share some examples of common facilities players may choose to build, and for all you Foxhole veterans watching, I'm really sorry about this, but at the end of the video, I'll show you new players that it is possible to build your own facility completely solo. So with that, let's grab our hard hats and dive into the video. Real quick before we cover what every facility needs, I'll be using a helpful tool called Foxhole Planner to show you how each facility will be set up. If you're not familiar or haven't used Foxhole Planner before, it's extremely useful for planning out your facility builds, knowing how much power or MSUPs it'll cost to upkeep, and it gives you an easier way of testing out different builds without needing to dedicate a whole afternoon placing blueprints and deleting them in-game. If you want to check it out, I left a link to the website down in the description. So in order to build a facility, there are a few basic structures and features that are required. Facility buildings need to be built on top of concrete foundations. These concrete foundations are built by turning coal into gravel at a refinery. You'll be needing a lot of gravel if you're planning to build a large facility. Gathering coal to turn into gravel is the very first step you'll need to take before building a facility. Once you have enough gravel, it's time to start building the foundational blueprint to your facility. You'll need to use a CV to start placing foundations for your facility. Some players will choose to have a small blueprint in the beginning since Tier 1 facility is teched and will build up later on once Tier 2 and Tier 3 is unlocked. I personally like to get the full blueprint built up so that the space is reserved and I can see the room I'm working with in-game. But the choice is up to you. Now it's time to add some facility buildings, the first being a diesel power plant. Facility buildings require power to run, and in order to generate power, you'll need power plants in the early stages of the war to run those facility buildings. Before we place the power plant, let me touch on the importance of planning your facility beforehand. Each building should be strategically placed both for ease of use and for connecting structures like pipes for quick or easier fueling. There are other structures like resource and material transfer pads that players will choose to place on the outside of their facility in order to easily drop off resources and transport them using a small train line. If you're a facility builder just starting for the first time, don't get too discouraged with build placement in the beginning. You'll slowly pick up on what's working and not working. Just as an example, one thing that I started noticing when building facilities was the fact that I'd be blocking off the input-output for pipe fluid by placing other buildings in the way. And another common issue that comes up as a beginner for facility building is using liquid containers for fueling your diesel power plant or petrol power plant. In the early stages of the war, it's fine to leave a liquid container with diesel next to your diesel power plant, but as soon as Tier 2 is unlocked, you have access to pipes, and at that point, it's so much more efficient and easier for you to switch to a liquid transfer station and have a pipeline going from a nearby oil field to your facility. But basically, if you're trying to build a facility, take your time, plan it out before you start placing buildings, and don't be afraid to ask your neighbors or fellow players for their opinion. If you're ever looking for a second opinion, feel free to join my Discord in the description and shoot me a screenshot of your build. Aside from power, all facilities will require a materials factory. Material factories can produce construction materials, which is a key component to almost every recipe in basic to advanced facility building. Whether it's assembly materials to use for different build variants of tanks, ammunition for artillery, or even materials to build more advanced facility buildings, you'll need a constant supply of construction materials to build it all. Additionally, material factories produce maintenance supplies, which leads to the next point for basic fundamentals for facility building. Every facility will eventually decay and despawn. In order to avoid that from happening, a maintenance tunnel needs to be built in close proximity to your facility. Using MSUPs from your materials factory, you can drop them off into the maintenance tunnel and prevent your base from decaying. The decay system in Foxhole is based on the number of buildings and other objects like tanks and trucks. The more buildings and vehicles you have in proximity to your maintenance tunnel, the more material supplies it will cost to upkeep. Luckily, you can adjust what the tunnel is actually upkeeping by selecting and deselecting the options on screen here. At this point, you should have a relative grasp on the basics. You'll need to collect gravel in order to build the concrete foundations for your facility. That's obtained from gathering coal and turning it into gravel at a nearby refinery. Build yourself a CV and put the gravel into it to start building your foundations. Once you have your foundations laid, you can start placing your first facility buildings, the diesel power plant and a material factory. Now it's time to start running the facility. If you press E next to your materials factory, you'll be able to start a production order. This view on screen will show you that salvage is needed in order to create a construction material. Moving forward, I'm going to be showing this view, but in the Foxhole planner, just so it's easier for me and we can be consistent that way. From here, I can see just how much salvage is needed to create one construction mat. In addition, I can see how much power it'll draw and the estimated time to complete. But not only that, I can also see that it'll cost 150 salvage to create 20 maintenance supplies. This draws a little bit more power and takes 40 seconds to complete. You can also see below that some of these production orders are grayed out. At this point, we'll talk about upgrades to your facility. Almost every facility building can be upgraded to unlock new recipes or enhance the efficiency of your facility. Just as an example, the diesel power plant that we built can be upgraded to a petrol power plant. This would cost 100 construction mats, but it would allow you to fuel your facility with petrol instead of diesel, which is much more efficient. Switching to a petrol power plant is also great because you can automatically fuel it using pipes that connect to a nearby oil field. This is all a bit more advanced and it's something I plan on covering in a separate guide for advanced facility building. Going back to the materials factory, you can upgrade it to a forge, which allows you to make assembly materials 1 and 2. These are used for building different tank variants and for more powerful tanks in general. You could also upgrade to a metal press, which increases your construction material output, or an assembly bay, which can still create construction materials, but it also has a second output of sandbags, barbed wire, or metal beams. And with that, let's take a look at some example facility bases. And some of these are going to be including those upgraded factories that we just touched on. So in this section, I'm going to be dividing it up into 3 parts. During a war, facility tech is unlocked in 3 tiers. Tier 1 facility unlocks at the very start of the war. Tier 2 is often unlocked closer to the middle of the war alongside light tanks. And last is Tier 3, which allows for the construction of late game battle tanks and super heavies. I'll show you an example build of what facility players will typically build during these tiers, starting off with Tier 1. So in a Tier 1 facility, we're following the same structure that I mentioned earlier, getting the foundations down first as a overall blueprint of the space I'll be occupying. On the top right-hand side of the facility are 3 diesel power plants. These will later be upgraded to petrol once Tier 2 is unlocked. In addition, we have 2 different materials factories. And the reason why I made 2 is because I want to have an option to make assembly materials 1 and 2 simultaneously. This materials factory here would be connected to petrol directly so that I'd be able to make assembly materials 2 without needing to constantly refuel manually. On the bottom left-hand side, we've got 2 resource transfer stations. I've just marked them as salvage and coke, but they would be filled with literally anything that I decide to bring to the facility. I'll either have a stationary crane installed here or some other crane that I can build and just leave over here on the south side of the facility so that I can take resource containers, drop them off into the pad, and then load them back up on a flatbed. Just above that, we also have the small assembly station. This is going to be used to create a small train line, which you can already see we have a train track for here. This will be extremely useful for transferring resources at the bottom left up to the factories at the top right. There's going to be some other factories around here as well, which I'll be showing once we get to Tier 2. Lastly, I have a maintenance tunnel at the end of the train line. That way I can take MSUPs from the materials factory and bring them down to the maintenance tunnel. Overall, though, you can see on the right-hand side, it's going to cost 900 B mats, over 1,000 C mats, and over 4,000 gravel to create everything that you see on screen here. In terms of power, I'll be producing 15 megawatts and consuming 4. And last, we can see that the maintenance supply or MSUP cost for the facility, as it is right now, would be 72 MSUPs per hour. When building this layout, because of the awkward placement of the resource transfer stations here, I'd probably place the small assembly station first, as close as I can to the edge of this foundation. And then I would want to line up these resource transfer stations to the back end of this small assembly station, just so everything's in line. All right, let's take a look at a Tier 2 facility now. All right, and now we are at a Tier 2 facility. Tier 2 is just teched. We've made some changes. We've made some upgrades. Let's start at the top and work our way down. Let's look at the top right. So now we can see we've got a few pipes here. Our icons changed now to petrol because we've upgraded the diesel power plants to petrol. They're going to be running off of petrol that's connected to a line and feeds to an oil field. Don't sweat the pipelines here that are feeding into the oil field. You can still make use of these liquid transfer stations by taking a liquid container, dropping it off on this pad, and dumping it into the transfer station. This top one is dedicated to the petrol, and it feeds into the power plants. This bottom one is heavy oil. It would feed into the metalworks facilities down here. We've got 3 metalworks facilities, one making assembly materials 4, the other one making assembly materials 3. This last one hasn't been set yet because we are waiting for tier 3 to unlock before we actually upgrade it. Next, I've added a couple of cranes here. This is going to help with either keeping a large tank on a reservable crane or also unloading and loading up resource containers. This small assembly station that wasn't upgraded during the tier 1 section is now upgraded to a tank factory. This allows us to make different variants of tanks at our facility. Just above that, we have a ammunitions factory. This is going to be dedicated to making large shells like 75 or 94.5 millimeter for our large tanks. And lastly, we have the large assembly station. Again, this is where our BTs, our super heavies, this is where they're going to be made. Right now, because that's only unlocked in tier 3, we haven't upgraded it yet, but for some facility owners, they may choose to take advantage of this pad and make a large train. And we can see now that the cost has increased a bit. We have now just over 1,000 process construction materials. This is made at the metalworks factories. You can also see that we also have 23 pipes that are required to actually pipe up the liquid transfer stations to the power or different parts of the facility. And our maintenance supplies increased just a little bit. I'm actually kind of surprised it's only at 93, just a minor jump from 75 in tier 1, but I am kind of keeping this footprint small. I'm going to touch on this a little bit later in the video, but everyone's got their idea of how you should build a facility. I personally like the idea of keeping it lean, small, and I don't need to have every single building in the facility running 24/7. Oftentimes I'll turn off maybe one of the materials factories or one of the metalworks factories if I want to save on time and resources. Other times, I'm fine with just one small assembly station. I don't need to have like 4 or 5 of these guys running in my backline facility. So that's why some of these examples you're going to be seeing are more lean. I'm just trying to cover as much as I can in a smaller footprint. The other reason why the MSUP cost is so low is because we haven't even added defenses to this facility build yet. So just be warned, the cost is going to go up considerably when you add defenses, which you should be doing. We'll touch on that just a little bit later in the video. All right, that's tier 2. We're going to jump to tier 3 now, and there's not much of a difference in cost, but let's get into that right now. All right, so this is an example of a T3 facility. We can now see that at the top left, that large pad can make BTs. We're able to also make 75 millimeter ammo for this BT as well. The metalworks factory at the bottom right has been upgraded to an engineering station so that we can make steel construction materials. Everything you see in the facility is included for the main purpose of building these larger tanks, but also different variant tanks from the small assembly station. You can now see also that the construction cost has increased. We have more process construction materials that went into the facility. We can also see steel construction materials were added to the cost. If you look at the facility power now, the production stayed the same at 36 megawatts, but the consumption has increased dramatically. That's because of us running the materials factory, the ammunition factory, and also a large assembly station. In an event where I'm trying to make a BT, first of all, I would be moving all of the resources to make one at the pad. I'd probably turn this one off, and then that should give us enough power, which it does, to run the large pad. And again, this just goes back to my philosophy of you don't need to have every single factory in your facility running at all times. And if we really wanted to make this leaner, I could probably take out another one of these petrol power plants, take out one of these material factories, and that'll make it just a little bit more leaner. But this is kind of what you can expect with the tier 3 facility. After this BT is done building, I'll put it on one of these cranes that's reserved so that nobody else can take it, and it frees up the pad to build another BT. I could probably include a material transfer station as well, just so that there's an easier way to unload and put the 75 millimeter on pallets. One thing I want to mention is notice how the facility transformed over time. This is why planning is so important, because you want to avoid situations where you'll need to destroy or rebuild sections of your facility. If planned properly, you should be able to go from tier 1 to tier 3 without needing to destroy any of your buildings. Now that you've gotten to see the different tiers of facilities, let's take a look at some solo facility designs. I'll be showing you 2 low-cost facilities that players can afford to build completely solo. These facilities also have the added benefit of being extremely helpful to your faction. So let's take a look, starting off with the Frontline Defense Facility. If you look at the top right, the cost for this facility is extremely affordable. You have 550 basic materials, 130 construction materials, 25 processed construction materials, and 1,350 gravel to make everything you see here. A simple 3x3 design that has 2 power plants that aren't even upgraded to petrol, they're just regular diesel power plants. A resource transfer station for you to drop off your materials that will then go into the facility, which will be turned into mines, sandbags, barbed wire, and any other defensive item you can think of. We would have a train line here as well, just to quickly pull and transport the raw resources into the facility itself. And also you'll be able to pull whatever you end up making in the facility out on this train line and put it in these 2 material transfer pads. In terms of the focus and what this facility is, so we have a materials factory that's set up as an assembly bay so that you can make sandbags, barbed wire, and metal beams. You're still going to be able to make CMATs, but you will have the added benefit of also creating these other defensive materials, which is extremely helpful for your faction to build defenses. Next, we have the ammunition factory, and this is just the base form of the factory. You'll be able to upgrade this, which we'll talk about in just a second, to give you more options. But right now, we're just focusing on its base variant, and here you'll be able to create anti-personnel mines as well as AT mines. This facility would be crucial for defending choke points and also adding additional layers of defenses to your frontline bunker bases. If you wanted to, you could upgrade this to a ammunitions factory. It would increase the pecan costs to 175, so your total now would be 200 processed construction materials. That might be kind of high, but you know what? Honestly, if you can work together with other nearby facilities and tell them what you're trying to build here, they may be willing to give you some processed construction materials or let you use their facility to make them. But the great thing here is not only can you make mines, you can also make artillery shells for your artillery crews on the front line. And I can promise you artillery shells go fast on the front line. So if you are able to build a facility like this, you'll be helping out your team immensely. But that's it, guys. It's a very straightforward base, very simple 3x3, very clean, neat design. And the only last comment I'd probably say about this is, and this goes for any facility that you're building on the front line, be cognizant of where you're placing the facility. Make sure it's not blocking any AI defenses or key choke points. And with that, let's take a look at the final solo facility build, which is a ammo facility. Now this one's going to cost you a little bit more in terms of materials. You're going to need 600 BMATs, 580 construction materials, 250 processed construction materials, 1800 gravel, and 2 pipes. But what you end up getting and also giving your faction is an incredible boon to ammunition. It's a slightly larger footprint than the previous example that I showed. You're still going to be using 2 power plants. These have been upgraded to petrol in order to run everything in the facility you see here. At some point, we are going to need to turn off the materials factory when we're switching to production for the infantry kit factory. Reason why is because we're missing 2 megawatts here. If you wanted to do a 3rd petrol power plant, you could do that and you could be able to run everything here. But for purposes of showing just a smaller, leaner facility, I'm sticking with just 2 right now. These 2 petrol power plants will be drawing fuel from this liquid transfer station. This is where you'll drive up, you'll drop a liquid container of petrol, and it's going to automatically refuel these 2 power plants. You'll also have a materials factory just like we saw earlier in the previous example. You could, if you wanted to, switch this over to a metal press instead to have more construction material output. But because this would technically be a frontline facility, it's still a good idea to have an output of barbed wire or sandbags or metal beams. But the main point I want to focus on here is the infantry kit factory that we've upgraded to a heavy munitions foundry. The reason why this is such a huge boon to your faction is not only the fact that you're making different uniforms for them using the CMATs at your facility, but you're also making extremely important tank shells like the 40mm tank shells, 68s, 30 mils. But not only that, guys, you're also making rockets. You're making AP RPGs. You're making ARC RPGs. You're also making Tremola grenades for all you collies out there, or Varsi grenades for the Wardens. These are all super useful munitions that every single frontline needs to have in order to make a push. And as you can see, it only costs construction materials and explosive powder. So as long as you're driving up explosive powder to your facility, you'll run that same train line back and forth. It's not just shells you'll be making here, but you're actually contributing in a super helpful way for your faction. Now for the slight trade-off with this particular facility. So if you notice, there is this other building called a crate transfer station. Now, when you're creating these shells, it is creating them as a uncrated 40 mil in a box of 10 shells. Now, what you would do is you would take these, you'd put them into the crate transfer station, and then you would show up in a shipping container to take out in bulk all these crates of shells. The thing is, you can't immediately take those and submit them to a town base or a relic base. So if you were to show up, let's say in a hauler, and you would take them directly from the factory and drive them to a frontline bunker base or a relic base, the game will not let you submit them into that bunker base inventory. What you need to do after you take these disassembled crates from the crate transfer station or directly from the infantry kit factory, you drive it to a nearby storage depot or seaport. Submit those crates into the inventory of that storage depot or seaport, and then you can take them out and submit them to a bunker base or a relic base. It's another step that you'll need to do, but it's still extremely useful and extremely helpful for the front line if you have a seaport or storage depot in hex. If you don't have either of those, this facility is pretty much useless for that specific hex, but every single hex has one of these, so you should still try and build one. In the event that it's nuked or controlled by the enemy though, you'll have to look somewhere else. But those are two examples of some solo friendly facility builds that you can create today. And that concludes this beginner guide for facilities. A couple of key things to remember if you plan on building a facility. Always remember to reserve your facility to your squad. You can walk up to any building and click the reserve for active squad button, and this will apply a reserve lock to the other buildings in your facility. Now, if you forget this, your facility will become public, meaning players can take from your resource transfer station and move your cranes if they're connected to power. Also, make sure you're keeping tabs on your maintenance tunnel. Check it every few days or so and keep a steady supply of MSUPs available at your facility to top off the tunnel. If you're building a facility, even if it's small, it's a good idea to have defenses built around it. A lot of beginner players think that facility building is just that, but in reality, you need to know how to build defensive structures around your facility to keep it safe from partisans. In my next beginner guide, I'll be covering base building for both frontline defenses as well as facilities, so stay tuned for that. And lastly, don't be discouraged by other players talking about your facility. I'd say base building and facility building are some of the more toxic aspects to Foxhole. Everyone has their opinion on how you should be building and setting up your facility. I can almost guarantee some of you will be approached by other players saying you're doing something wrong or to stop building entirely. There are definitely efficient ways of building a facility as well as defenses around it, but the beauty of Foxhole is the fact that it's a sandbox game. You're free to build something of your own, learn from the process, and get better ideas over time. Your facilities will likely get partisan at some point, and that's part of the game, and it's sometimes unavoidable. But if you learn from your mistakes, identify gaps in your build, and keep improving, you'll make something that'll last throughout the war. But that's it for the video, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. For all you veteran facility builders watching, drop a hidden nugget of information down in the comment section below for the new players to learn from. And if you enjoyed this beginner guide and you want to see more videos like this one, then consider leaving a like and subscribe to the channel for more Foxhole related content. Take care, and I'll see you all in the next one.
Me and yo nigga be chopping it. I'm jacking this dick so he spit in my mouth. Ain't no slurping ass begging for cocking it. Ain't fucking with pussy, my blood got the munchies. I see the dick rise while I'm popping it. And grip on my willy, all touchy and Philly. I kiss on the lips of a hot nigga. We mixing up bitches with niggas.
I'm a tranny.
No, you still got a cock, nigga. Trying to figure which dick I'ma take.